Hey everyone, welcome back to Breakthrough, a Dale Carnegie podcast. My name is Faith Wright and co-hosting today is Parker Mays. We're excited to have our special guest, Sam Eaton, on today. Sam is an author, speaker, founder of Recklessly Alive. It's a suicide prevention organization sprinting toward a world with zero deaths by suicide. Wow, that is so awesome. Sam has spoken at over 150 events throughout the US, sharing his battle with depression and suicidal thoughts like so many can relate to. Sam's first book, Recklessly Alive, What My Suicide Attempt Taught Me About God and Living Life to the Fullest, was released in January of 2021 and has reached the top 100 best-selling books on Amazon. That's incredible. He has more than 125,000 followers on Instagram, over 800,000 or 80,000 followers on TikTok. So guys, go follow him and under the handle @Recklessly Alive. So Sam is living currently in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and he's been collecting vinyl records, lifting moderately heavy weights, he says, and trying every flavor of Oreos. Oh my goodness, Sam, this is so awesome. We're so glad you're on the podcast to share some serious things as well as some humor in there, all that God has been teaching you, challenges that you've been through, kind of covering it all. So student leaders that are listening, parents, teachers, anyone can really benefit from this podcast. Sam, thanks for being on. Can you start with just telling us a little bit about your childhood and how you came to be the awesome person that you are now?
Amen. Well, thank you so much for having me. My childhood was tumultuous, to say the least. I grew up with an alcoholic father who, as a result of that disease, caused a lot of pain in my life. Coming home from school, I never really knew if it was going to be like a laughy, jokey kind of a drunk day or like a chair throwing day. And so I kind of became this peacekeeper, just try to keep everyone happy. If I just unload the dishwasher, maybe we won't have any explosions today. He left when I was 12. I haven't really seen him since or had a relationship with him since. But from the outside, like I really kept things together. In middle school, I was on the honor roll. I started on the basketball team. And in high school, things really fell apart. My grades went from A's to C and D's. Suddenly, I couldn't concentrate or focus for the first time in my life. I felt so stupid. I used to write on my papers over and over again, I hate my life. I hate my life. And I truly just didn't want to exist. I just wanted to fade into the wall. Like if you gave me a button and it was like this, but push this button and you never would have existed, I would have pushed that every day 100 times. I was just in so much pain. And what I didn't know is, first of all, what I was experiencing has a name. It's called depression, right? Like the most 1 in 6 people will battle depression at some point in their life. 1 in 5 people will battle mental illness. Super common what I was experiencing. Unfortunately, nobody helped. Nobody stood up and ever said, here's what depression is, here's what suicidal thoughts are, and here's how you can move through that.
Sam, I think you're speaking to a lot of Gen Zs that are listening on this podcast. It is a rising pandemic, like the loneliness pandemic, the mental health pandemic is skyrocketing, depression rates, anxiety, I mean, you name it. And so knowing that a bunch of listeners might be experiencing what you have fought through and battled, there's a sort of alignment there, knowing that you're not alone. Anyone that's listening, just hearing you, it's so inspiring, I think, for those that say, wow, he went through all these things and he's at where he is today. Maybe there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe God can teach me something through this, even though I feel so hopeless right now. And so what would you say to someone that's in the midst of that? Like if you could speak to your younger self, what would you say to those that are trying to just get through the day?
First and foremost, that our brains can lie to us and our brains can get sick too. So someone who's experiencing mental illness isn't seeing or experiencing the world as it really is. Truthfully, that disease kind of blocks out the light and the hope that we're meant to experience. It blocks out the love of our family and friends. For a lot of people, they describe depression not as like deep sadness, which it can be, but a lot of times it's numb. We don't talk about the numbness enough. Everything in your life that used to feel fun, your hobbies, being with people, suddenly all of that just feels like nothing. It just feels like a waste of time. So first and foremost, it's that your brain can lie to you. You don't have to believe everything that you think. Sometimes you got to fight back against those voices in your head or your thoughts. There's lots of ways to learn to change that. Talk therapy was a big part of my journey on that, as well as learning to care for my body. But first and foremost, it starts with, okay, we're not going to listen to everything that we think, and we're gonna understand that it won't always hurt this much. The research shows most people see signs of improvement in 4 to 6 weeks when they start a combination of treatments. Depression is very fightable. For people like me, you might fight it your whole life. I continue to battle it. It's something I continue to find my way through. But for a lot of people, they see relief pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I'm curious, Sam, like as you were kind of going through your journey, I know, you and I met a few years back when at least your social presence was a little bit earlier on. Like, I mean, when Faith read that number out of 125 plus thousand, followers on Instagram, I remember when we first chatted, I was saying, he's got 12,000 followers on Instagram, right? Tell us more about your journey of sharing your story. And what do you feel like it is that people are resonating with, and your content that people are really saying, hey, this guy Sam, he's got something special, and he's got something that's inspiring me to be here another day and to be, to continue pressing on.
First and foremost, I mean, when I decided that, okay, I'm going to do something to help other people, I was teaching at the time. I taught in public schools for 12 years before leaving to do this work full time. And where I was teaching, we lost 3 students, a teacher, and a principal in about a year and a half that all took their own life. And each one was like a little nudge from God that I have to do something to fight back. I don't know what that will be. I just have to do something. And quickly through research, I found that talking about suicide doesn't make it any more likely that someone will attempt. It makes it much more likely that they'll seek help. So anyone listening to this who's afraid to talk about it in your classrooms, at your workplace, in your family, there's no research that shows that you're going to make it worse. And more likely, you're going to help normalize this and help people open up to what they're experiencing. When I attempted, I'd only ever told one person in my whole life that I felt that way. And when I told her, she burst into tears and almost never talked to me again. And it seems like no shame on her. We're not taught how to deal with that. But I didn't want my hurtness to hurt anyone else. So first and foremost, I was like, well, I can talk about this. I can build a platform. I can figure out how to share my story and do the inner work to have the confidence to share my story. It's not easy. I mean, I get hate messages every single day, especially as a man with a mental health creator. Every single day, I get messages like simp and can't even tell you, can't say it here, the horrible things that I get. Wow. But I choose to show up and be authentic every day. That's it. I share the good and the bad. I think so much of our social media is just polished and fake, truthfully. And so I'm really proud of the hard work I put into building this. And I don't know why people continue to follow me, but I'm really thankful. It's been a big blessing in my life.
Your authenticity really shines through, Sam. And I know why it connects with so many people is because amongst all of the flashy, maybe fakeness that we do see on social media, you bring like this raw, authentic voice that is able to cut deep into people and to connect in people in a way that others might not. And so I'm just so inspired by that, and the way that you're impacting people is incredible, especially with your faith. So if we shift gears to talking about your faith for a second, how has God really been a part of this for you and helped you through these times? Can you speak on that foundation for a little bit?
So I was raised in the church. There's this kind of fallacy that Christians don't struggle with mental health or suicidal thoughts, and that's just not true. When I attempted suicide at age 23, I was a member of a church. I went on a regular basis. truthfully, what I have learned is that when you're fighting mental illness, you're fighting a battle on three fronts, which is one of the reasons it's so hard to fight. There's a very physical side of mental health, which is happening in your body. And that's things like sleep, how you eat, exercise, hydration, maybe some medication. How you feel in your body affects your mental health. There's a very mental side to this conversation of if you've been through trauma, working through and processing that, how you talk to yourself, what you believe about yourself, even just your attitude. People with pessimistic attitudes are much more susceptible to depression. So the ways that we work to be real and be a little more positive. And then there absolutely is a spiritual side to mental health. There, knowing that you were made on purpose for a purpose, that God knew us before we were in the womb, that he had great plans for our life. When you understand that you weren't an accident, and that you have access to a God who's loving and forgiving, and is a God who brings people back from the dead. Like, that's literally what he does. Is in the Bible says, like, God raised Jesus from the dead, and that same power is living and breathing in you. And we have access to all of that. However, we have to work on all three, right? A lot of churches will just say, well, just pray more and just study your Bible more. Well, no, there's like physical and mental things that need to happen as well. A lot of therapists will just focus on the trauma piece. It's like, well, no, go exercise and find a purpose. And doctors will be like, well, just here's a pill. So it's kind of balancing the three, and it changes over time. But truthfully, I hope everyone listening, I hope that you'll get to know God and understand what he's really like. Or at the very least, start finding a purpose for your life, start volunteering, giving back, and seeing that your life has such a greater value beyond a lot of what this world says we are, just the way we look, the money we make.
Yeah. And it's so powerful. Thank you for sharing your perspective on that, and how much goes into it, because I think that's what people don't realize as much as like, oh, here's how I'm feeling, like, oh, it's kind of like this mental struggle, but there's so many elements of it and so many perspectives into it. And I'm curious from your side, you mentioned if you're struggling, even being able to go out and find that passion, find something that you can, invest time into and kind of fulfill some of that purpose element of your life. What was that for you initially when you started searching for kind of whether it was career or life or sharing? What was your process, or how did you find your purpose and passion?
So immediately following my attempt, I had kind of two promises to God. One of them was I wanted to use the pain I experienced to help someone else. That would take me 5 or 6 years to be able to talk and figure that out. And then the other promise was I was going to do one thing every single day that made my life better or made the world a better place. It could be something simple like clean a closet. It could be a new exercise class. It could be volunteering. And if I felt like it was something that maybe God would want me to do, I moved towards that. I mean, truthfully, the decisions I had made at that point in my life led me to a place where I didn't even want to be alive. And so I needed to put myself out into the world. And maybe that's the hardest part about loving someone or caring for someone with mental illness, is there's this balance between self-compassion, right? Don't be so hard on yourself, but also sometimes you got to push yourself to do the things you don't want to do. And what that kind of adventure led me to was different volunteering opportunities, meeting with friends. It was the way that I started to take my life back. And it's something that I've done several times since. Over time, I started Recklessly Live back in 2016. And now it's kind of even grown into my full-time job, which I love. I mean, I have the coolest job in the world. But when it comes down to it, it's like, there's something about purpose, and there's something about finding a way that you can help somebody else through the hard times they're going through that also will help you.
That is so inspiring. And for anyone listening to this, thinking, okay, what is my purpose? I've been trying to find it. Sam knows his purpose. I see so many other people that know their purpose, right? I just want to figure that out. I want to see how I can impact the world, how I can give back, right, based on my strengths and talents and passions. Sam, is there a way that you would give advice to people who are trying to figure that out like you did?
Oh, absolutely. I've got a lot to say on that. Let's go. Okay. So
Nice.
First and foremost, we all have more than one purpose, and our purpose changes over time, right? Like if you have kids, one of your purpose on this planet is to be a great parent and to lean into them. So I think sometimes we put too much pressure on this idea of purpose. My purpose in becoming a teacher was I wanted to help as many kids feel loved, seen, and heard, because I didn't. So sometimes the best place to start in finding your purpose are your scars, right? Your scars are your superpower. Like what you have been through can be a gift to so many other people. Like I think about, I mentored through Big Brothers Big Sisters for a long time, and that was a way that I could reach back into my story, mentor some younger kids, and in that it like healed some things in me too. Now over time that shifted. I accidentally became really passionate about suicide prevention. It wasn't on purpose, it was just a need that I saw. And I happen to think everybody has little things tucked away. You see a story on the news that just hits you a little different. I think we have these little nudges from God or from the universe. They're just saying, like, maybe you hear stories on sex trafficking and you read that there are more people in slavery right now than any time in history. And maybe you're like, I need to do something about that. Well, just take one little step, get on an email list, volunteer somewhere. Like, it doesn't have to be you starting an organization. It took me years and almost a decade to get what I'm doing, but it all just started with these little yeses and these little steps forward to exploring. You're not going to find your purpose sitting at home staring at your phone. I'm sorry, you're not. You have to go out into the world. You have to meet people. You have to put yourself out there. And I 100% know that anyone listening would find that if you truly went out and tried to find it, it would find you.
Yeah, and that piece of it, just being able to pursue it, find, just going out and being willing to take the risk of it, right? I think that's it for so many young people. It feels risky, or it feels, like, oh, there's such a big task in front of me. Breaking that down into what is that just first step. One of our guests, Doug, said, not waiting till all the lights are green before backing out of the driveway, right? And I love that analogy, because so often we want every single light, on the whole journey to be green before we even take that first step. And it really is saying, okay, if I just back out of the driveway, and that's that first step that I can take today, let's get started, right? I'm curious, what on a day-to-day now, I know that you've kind of transitioned into a lot of speaking, and I mean, you're doing a lot of travel now and things like that. What was the point where you shifted and felt like, okay, I want to do this, the Recklessly Alive brand and kind of your personal brand more full time? And you did, I know you had launched the book and you were doing the speaking. And so what did that transition look like for you?
So I was a choir teacher and music teacher, and maybe 5 years ago, they paid a bunch of money to send me to this national conference for 5 days and listen to all these really smart people. And I was sitting in a lecture hall, and it just hit me square in the face. I do not care a second about the right way to sing a vowel anymore. I don't care. I love music. This isn't the core of what I want to spend my time doing anymore. It had shifted, and that's okay. I couldn't immediately quit my job. I actually applied for a leave right before COVID, and they were like, nah, your job's too hard to fill. We don't care if you want to go help people not hurt themselves. Like, oh, that's great. Then COVID happened, which was actually a blessing, because obviously there wasn't any speaking happening. But before that, I had about 30 or 40 requests that I just had to say no to every year because teaching was so inflexible. I was really scared. Truthfully, like money, it's just, we struggled with money growing up, not knowing always where that next paycheck was coming from. There's like a level of fear and a level of trusting God there. And I can always get another job. I can always do something else. But right now it's pretty cool to be square in the middle of excited about what's going on and getting to just share some hope, right? Like at the end of the day, I just get to be a hope dealer, and it's a pretty great profession.
I love that, hope dealer. Can you tell us a little bit about your book too, along with speaking? So when did you decide, okay, I guess I'm doing this. I'm going to launch a book. A lot of people say that they're going to launch a book, and then not a lot of people do. So how did you actually do that? And can you share a nugget or two from in there for people who haven't read it? Mm-hmm.
It is, man, writing a book is so hard. Gosh, it's so hard. It took me 7 years to get it out. I was actually doing some missionary work in Zimbabwe, and I just was like, we are all sharing a dream that we had. And I was like, I have a dream to write a book. It was the first time I'd ever said that out loud. And so I got home and I opened a Word document because I don't know how to write a book. Like, what do you do? Like, literally, I just was like, okay, I guess you write this in Word. And so I sat on my deck for like 3 or 4 hours and I wrote an introduction. And in the introduction, I thought it was going to be just like a funny, haha book, kind of like my blog was at the time. And instead, the story of my suicide attempt came out, which I hadn't told anyone. The words "recklessly alive" came out in that introduction. Part of that introduction became part of the book that's still there today. That was a real shift for me of like, oh, shoot, like not only am I going to write a book, like we're going to write some really hard things. So I wrote a first version of the book. Eventually, a really pretty big Christian publisher reached out and was like, man, we love your writing. We don't like your book. Write a new one. So we spent 14 months writing a full new version of this book. At the end of that, they were like, yeah, we don't think anyone's going to buy a book on suicide. Sorry, peace. Call us when you're more famous. And I was like, what? Why would you ever have someone write 14 months of a new book? So then a good friend of mine read both versions. We ended up combining them, spent another full year really just getting it right, and came out in January of 2020. It did okay. It was like a little blip. And then in June of that year, I had a TikTok that went viral and it sold, I don't know, 3,000 copies in 2 days. It was number 67 out of every book on Amazon. It was for 27 days, it was the number 1 book on Christian faith. And I haven't sent a letter to that publisher. I've posted about it on Facebook a lot. But turns out people actually do want to read a book that has to do with Jesus and suicide. The faith stuff isn't, God is in there. Absolutely. It's a lot of questions. It's not very preachy. I've gotten a lot of compliments from atheists saying, we love this book. Anyway, it was a very long journey. My suicide attempt happens in the very middle of the book. So the first half of the book is stories that led up to that and just little things that I've learned. And people who might have someone in your life, it can help you understand, how does a person get there? What are the thoughts? What are the stories, the bullying? What are the things that get a person to think maybe they're worthless and that the world would be better off without them? And then the second half of the book are stories of things since. Going to Africa, I finished a marathon. I was working in homeless ministry for a little while. I started my organization. So the second half of the book is all these hard things too. It's not perfect, but the second half of the book is more uplifting and the things that I would have missed.
That's powerful. I remember hearing you say that it's everything that I would have missed, or all the experiences that I wouldn't have had if that change hadn't been made. And I'm curious, I remember when the first time we chatted, one of the most actionable things that I learned from you was I asked, in conversations with friends, right, when suicide comes up, or if a friend comes to me saying, hey, I am thinking about killing myself, or something in that, I'm struggling with depression or anxiety or whatever it might be, how can I react in a way that's supportive and it's not the experience that you had with a friend, so long ago that, made you feel that way? So can you give, any high schoolers or college students listening that maybe they have someone in their life like that, how can we be supportive of those people?
Absolutely. First and foremost, just remain calm and just listen. Truthfully, when I've been suicidal, one of the best gifts anyone can give me is just to listen and empathize. I'm so sorry. That sounds like it must hurt so much. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to offer solutions. Just ask kind questions. You can say things like, I don't really understand, but I'm here for you. Like, I'm trying to understand more. You can just be vulnerable and say, yeah, I get this is a little uncomfortable for me too. Just be authentic, be real. Don't shut them down. Don't shame them. Don't try to give them the automatic fixes. Oh, cheer up. It's going to be okay. They've heard that a million times. It hasn't worked so far. And on the other side of it, just be brave enough to bring it up in conversation, especially when it comes up naturally. It just, whether that's a TV show or a movie that comes out, hey, have you heard of this TV show? Have you ever felt this way? Do you know anyone who's felt that way? That's the way that we normalize it for our friends and our families. And then if they get there, they already know you're a person who's willing to go there and willing to talk about it. You're not afraid of it. And it's just such a good way that we can save lives. And the other piece of that is part of my mission is I want every single person in the world to hear a story of someone who's battled depression and suicide and made it to the other side. I just think when we get stories out there, when we find people who are brave enough to share this stuff, then when that 18-year-old or that 22-year-old is having this moment for the first time, they say, oh, you know what, this is okay. Someone else has been there. Someone has told me this before. I'm going to get through it too. And then hopefully they're also willing to share it with someone.
Sharing holds so much power whenever we share. And just like you said, I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, your breakthrough was after your attempt, right? Whenever things started shifting and you kind of gained a new trajectory, that was a big breakthrough for
Absolutely.
you. But still, you never make it, right? No one's ever going to be like, oh, now I'm like not having any troubles in the world. Everything's perfect. We're still going to go through ups and downs. How do you now, at the space that you're at, you've done the inner work, you're healthier, right? But you still might have times, just like every other human, where, hey, I'm feeling a little down today. Do you surround yourself with community? Do you, what's your go-to, I guess, now to kind of get you out of that hump?
Yep. So it's like mental health, and everyone has mental health is listening to this. It's just trial and error. It's just an entire life of like, well, this worked last time, but it didn't work this time. So it's just constantly figuring it out. Sometimes I have to do the exact opposite of what I'm feeling like just like last week, friends invited me to dinner. I was having a bad day and I was like, I'm going to stay home. And I like started typing it and then I put it down for a second. And then I was like, I'm going to go. I'm just going to go. I can go for an hour. I can try. So that's part of it. Community, absolutely. Finding just a couple trusted people who are willing to be in that with me. Like we kind of have this thing in our world right now where people are like good vibes only, which is one of my biggest pet peeves. Like I wish everyone would be like real vibes only. Because when you say good vibes only, you're saying you can only be around me when you're happy and perfect and thriving. And that's not okay. So I've been in friend groups where that's the expectation, where they don't ask me, they don't want to know. I have family members who'll be like, it's cool what you do. I don't ever want to know the story. I don't want to hear about it. And that's fine, but those aren't my people. Those aren't my closest people, because I need a few people who are going to be in it with me. Exercise is huge. I was not an athletic kid. I was like in music and stuff. And I ran a marathon when I was 26. And I was like, oh, wow, this feels different when I'm doing something, a little bit of something every day. And then I did CrossFit for a while, and it's not perfect, but it gives me some of those feel-good chemicals that my brain maybe doesn't produce on its own or as much as I would like. And there's a lot of research about exercise and mental health. Journaling is a huge one. Gratitude, even just writing 3 things that you're thankful for every day, research shows starts to rewire your brain and release some of those chemicals for you. Giving back and volunteering, as I mentioned before. I talked with a nurse who works in an inpatient treatment program in Des Moines, and the best thing that they have found is getting their patients to volunteer. So if you didn't hear me say that 10 minutes ago, give back, find something to do, and just know that it's a process, right? All feelings are passing. Nobody's happy all the time. Nobody's sad all the time. But just do those little things, take those actions, push yourself to clean a closet or something, and then never be afraid to ask for help when you need it, because everybody needs help, whether they have mental illness or not. Everybody needs help. And sometimes you just got to be brave enough to ask for it.
Oh, so powerful. I remember when I was first looking through your work and social media and everything, I thought it was so unique that every day you would post a kind of a message, I don't know, an affirmation, whatever you want to call it, on your social media, and it's you holding a sticky note that is a message for someone that is on the other side of that screen. And really that style of post stuck with me. And if you're listening right now and you're able to, check out Sam's Instagram, it's at Recklessly Alive, and kind of see some of these examples. There's such impactful messages. But Sam, I'm curious, how did you come up with that format when you were, initially creating those? And how do you even, come up with it? I know you're posting them several times a week. How did you come up with that format? And then how do you come up with those messages that you're giving out into the world?
Trial and error. I had to go through the vulnerability of not having many followers and trying to post things and nobody liking it. I mean, that's just part of any time you're starting anything. You're going to fail. It's not going to work for a while. So I quickly learned, it's like, well, no, I'm not a model. Like, I'm not beating myself up here, but like nobody wants to look at just pictures of me standing by staircases, which I tried, by the way. Don't go look at them. They're terrible. But then one day I was like, I held up a sign, like a chalkboard sign, and it got way more likes. And I was like, okay, well, I'm a writer. I have words that I can say. So then I did the post-it note one day and it was my best ever. And then I do that every other day now with a video. But truthfully, it's a way for me to help people change their self-talk. Not everybody can afford therapy. Not everybody has access to therapy. So what are the tools? What are the videos? What are the things that I can teach people either to supplement their healing journey or to be that for them for a while until maybe they find the courage to finally ask for help. We don't talk a lot about self-talk in our world, how we talk to ourselves. And that is just so essential. And so I wish someone had been there in my lowest moments to give me some of these reminders and just some of these point out these gentle things in our lives that can make just a world of difference. So that's what I try to do now. It's a lot of work, but it's super, super rewarding. I was just in Maui, actually. I got super blessed. Someone gave me a trip to Maui, and the hostess at the pizza restaurant was like, do you have an Instagram? I was like, I do have an Instagram. She's like, are you kind of big on Instagram? I was like, I'm doing okay. And she knew me. She knew all of my stuff. She'd followed me for a long time. And I was like, it's cool. It's cool to see the impact. And I'm really proud of myself for how hard I've worked to build that.
Mm-hmm. The impact that you're making with your writing, how you use that strength to then go on to social media to encapsulate that and see how it's grown is just awesome. So you should be proud of yourself. Great job. And continue to do that. Seriously, what does the next 3 to 5 years look for you? Do you have any goals, any new content that you're wanting to be releasing, maybe another book? Why don't you share with us?
Yeah, so I just spent this year creating a mental health journal that just came out 2 weeks ago, the Recklessly Alive Mental Health Journal on Amazon. It's a 10-week journal and planner that uses all the tools that I have used. So it has a section on adventure and planning your bucket lists. It has a section on setting some goals. It has some sections on self-care. And then it has an inspirational message every day, kind of like my Post-it. It has a schedule. Keeping a schedule is really good for your mental health. And then it's got a reflection question and some journal pages, and it has that for 10 weeks. It was a huge project, but I'm really, really proud of it. And it's really helped me. Truly, I just designed it for myself. I was like, nobody else has something that works. So that's been a big project. I am currently writing book 2. The hope is that it would be out fourth quarter next year, 2023. We'll see. It's hard, man. All those musicians and their sophomore slump album. I'm like, I already told the biggest story of my life. What's next? But I think I've got it. I'm enjoying writing it. It's difficult, but that's my favorite thing, is to just write books, and then just lots of speaking. There's a speaking request part on my page. If anyone is interested in bringing me to your community or your church or your school, I will tell this story just about anywhere that anyone will listen. And I love getting to do that and meet people who are living this right now.
So if people want to find you, they can go to @recklesslyalive. I know that we've mentioned that a couple times in the podcast. There's a place where, they can, if they want you to come speak, put in a speaking engagement request. Any other ways that people can find you on social media? You said Amazon.
Our website's recklesslyalive.com, @recklesslyalive, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. And yes, the book and the journal are both on Amazon. Recklessly Alive by Sam Eaton.
Perfect. Sam, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and just sharing your story, being so vulnerable and open, and the impact that you're making now is truly encouraging. And so I just wanted to thank you for that. I know that the listeners will be greatly impacted by it. And if you want to follow Dale Carnegie East NC on Instagram, you can do that. Also hit subscribe to be notified whenever we come out with a new podcast episode. And thank you everyone for listening. Thanks to Parker again for being a guest co-host. And we will see you on the next episode.